going to go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to stop screen sharing, and we're going to do a little warm-up activity. I always try to just model some different strategies that people can use. And so this is called immersive view. And those of you that don't have your video on, if you want to turn your video on, and we'll be able to see you in a seat just for fun. There's Cece. So I started off by saying hi to Cece, and in this warm-up game, whoever I start with, which is going to be Cece, is going to then say hello to someone else, and then that person's going to say hello to someone else until everyone says hello. So, hey Cece.
Hi, Kathy.
Oh, Kathy, we couldn't quite hear you.
Hi, Margie. That's because I was muted.
And Margie, we can't hear you either. You may be muted. Or she may have stepped away. maybe Kathy, say hello to somebody else.
Sure. Hi, Jessie.
Oh, I don't think Jessie's here, is she?
Oh, okay. I don't actually. There's.
Oh,
Jessie.
there she is. Jessie, you must have come in after. Let me try this immersive view thing again. That's weird because you're not in the you're not in the classroom, Jessie. I didn't see you. You were standing out in the hall. There you are. Okay. Here we go. There. So Kathy said hi to you, Jessie. Now you just say hi to somebody else.
Oh, how can I tell who's here?
You can go to the easiest way is go to participants list down on your Zoom toolbar.
Okay.
And it's okay if somebody gets to say hello twice, but
Okay, so hi, Roger.
Hello, and hi, Julie.
Hello. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Pete.
I don't know if anyone's left. So hi, Katie.
yeah, I think Margie had stepped away or when she was called on initially. So
yeah, somebody
hi,
called me,
Margie.
of course, right? It didn't. Somebody called on my phone. Sorry. Thank you, Pete. Hi, Cece. Did somebody say hi to Cece?
yeah, we started with Cece, so now we're back at the beginning. So that was just a little warm-up activity. So the immersive view is it's kind of silly, but when you go to immersive view, there are lots that only include a few people, a few seats. So if you have a small group, there's a lot more choices. But if you have a larger group, there are limited choices. This one is not very good, is it? Anyway, so it's kind of fun.
Where is that, Katie? How do you set that up?
Well, like all Zoom tools, you do have to go to your Zoom settings at alaska.zoom.us and
Okay.
turn it on, because a lot of times when new features are introduced by Zoom, UAA does not turn them on. You have to turn them on individually. But then once you do have that turned on in your settings, Kathy, in the top right corner under view,
Okay.
you'll see immersive view. So there'll be speaker view, gallery view, and immersive view, and you can pick immersive view. And then it tells you like how many people are allowed when you choose the immersive view. Like I said, there's many that are just for 2 people or 4 people or 8 people. But when you start getting a larger group like ours, you have very limited choices. But what's really kind of fun is that they occasionally add one, like they added a Halloween one related to, holidays. They have a Halloween one. That was kind of fun. I like this one. Can you guys see that?
Ooh.
It didn't fit all of us. So, but we are pretty.
But will it move then? I mean, if I was to say hi to Margie, who currently isn't in one of these portraits. Would she pop into a portrait when she spoke?
That's a great
Let's
test.
see. Here, I'll
Apparently
speak.
not.
Margie.
Guess not. Yeah,
I
I guess
think
I
it's-
don't.
I think it's because this one has a limit of 8. It's
Yeah.
just, that's what I was saying, that there's not that many that allow large groups. So anyway, just wanted to start off with something kind of fun. And actually to exit out of this, I just am going to change it back to speaker view, and that'll stop the immersive view. So Kathy came up as, I guess, the last person who spoke, but maybe you guys are seeing me or Kathy. Anyway, I'm going to switch back over to screen sharing, and we're going to, let's see, I have a million different, there it is, ones to choose from. Okay, so here's your little warm-up activity. Course design is a process. It's pretty systematic, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, are those steps. And so my question for you to think about is, when designing a course, you start with the blank in mind. So where do you start? And this is just a chance to kind of get you engaged in the topic, to give you something to think about. And you'll be able to answer that question here pretty soon. So we're talking about course design. And when I say course design as opposed to course delivery, I'm talking about whatever I do without the students there. So all the planning and preparing I do or we all do, of course, without the students there. And so delivery we'll have as another topic, but I am right now delivering. So I use some of the delivery methods that you've probably heard of. One very common one is tell, show, do, review, which we're not really teaching here, we're training, so it's a little different. And but I also really like the events of instruction, which can be a little bit easier to apply to a variety of types of teaching and training. And so I'll mention some of those as we go through. They're from before most of us were born. These events of instruction were first published, and they still apply today. So the first event of instruction is to hook or engage the students. And so I tried to do that as we started today. So we're not necessarily going to really get a chance to do all these, but we're going to do our best. So these are some of the outcomes for today's training session here. And you can see that we're focusing on the steps. I told you it's a process. We're going to talk about what we have to know before we do that, and that is who we're designing for. We're going to talk about measurable learning outcomes, and that's something I'm sure you already know something about, as well as assessment. But then we're going to talk about course alignment. So that's just making sure you really have everything lined up for the students to be able to meet those learning outcomes, and then a tool that you might find useful called alignment mapping. So this is a kind of an expanded version of the steps of course design, or tasks of course design. And I've bolded the 3 that we're really going to be focusing on. We'll just touch on the other ones because that's the core of course design. And so we're going to start with our learning outcomes. So now that you see this, as I said, this is kind of an expanded version, but the answer to our previous warm-up question was, when designing a course, you start with the end in mind. So you start with the end in mind was the answer to that. How many of you were close what you were thinking?
I think I was close. I had student learning outcomes in mind.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what we are talking about. And Kathy too. Good. Yeah. Those guys, they have tons of experience. Of course, they knew the answer. And
I'd
so,
actually say,
oh yeah,
in
yeah.
fact, I started, what's that ultimate goal? So I guess that's the same thing. What's the end?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So that's one of the confusing things is there's so many similar words like goal, objective, outcome. I've been trying to stick with outcome here, and I think that's the more specific one. But in a lot of the different models about course design, they use more generic terms like desired results, just because of the reason you were just saying, because you guys all had the right idea, you just may not have used the same words. And so selecting the assessments, so then how are you going to know that the students have met those outcomes? And that's when you have to figure out what your assessments are going to be. And then you're going to design the learning plan. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about here, but I've expanded it a little bit just because there's lots of different models of course design, and I just wanted to, I'm a big picture person, I guess. So it feels good to me to put things in perspective and into a bigger picture. So that's what I've done here. So we're going to briefly just talk about our learners. As I said, that's an important step that I wanted to touch on, because design thinking is all about humans, and we need to keep our target audience in mind whenever we're making any kind of decisions or designing anything. And as far as specifically designing a course, it is it's a misnomer to design for the average student. So you've probably seen that in literature. You've heard people say design for the average student, and that's actually not the best way to do it, because there really isn't an average student. So you end up not really meeting anyone's needs. And it turns out that designing for the margins or the edges or the fringes, which you might think of as universal design, is actually most effective way. So, however, you guys are lucky in that you really do have some specific types of learners in your program. You're not teaching those general ed courses that have all kinds of different majors and so on. So you do have that advantage. And so this is just one tool that people use in any kind of design project called empathy mapping. And it's just trying to find out who those learners are in our case, but the audience, of course. And so one other valuable graphic, at least I found it interesting, is what learners need. So everything from functional as the base that's absolutely required, to the top, which is meaningful with personal significance. So that's again what our hope is that we're not going to only provide the tasks. As you can see, the bottom three are defined as the tasks, but also those very engaging learning experiences. Any comments on these basics so far about who we're designing for? Okay, so another big picture thing that I felt compelled to mention briefly, and that is, as Margie and Kathy and I were talking about our goals, our outcomes, we're going to focus on course design. So we're going to be thinking at the course level, and you're all familiar with the KIM system and the curriculum guides and those student learning outcomes. That's what we're talking about when we're designing our courses. But I do want to say that the big picture is the university has core competencies. Of course, our school accreditation has goals and skills and knowledge competencies, and then your program School of Nursing has student learning outcomes as well. So all of those we are presuming were taken into account when the curriculum went through the system to appear on our curriculum guides for your courses. So we're going to focus at the course level. I know that some of you here, Kathy and Margie, have tons of experience. Any comments about this slide for those new folks?
The only thing I would maybe add, Katie, is that for some of us, like me teaching peds, Margie doing mental health. Julie, you're doing mental health this semester, aren't you, or this year? No, okay, sorry. There are also, it's probably also a good idea as you design your courses to look at core competencies by the leading organizations in those specialty areas. So it's not so openly addressed by the accrediting agencies and things, but we have Society of Pediatric Nursing or National Association of Neonatal Nursing, or I'm sure there's equivalents in other specialties who also usually have some pretty clear guidance on what new graduate nurses in those areas should look like. And so it's a good idea to at least consider those also as you're designing your course.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, exactly. That's the piece that I don't have that you have.
Well, and yeah, and that's a piece you don't even have if they say, hey, Kathy, you're going to teach med-surg nursing this semester. I don't have that piece either, but if it's peds, I do. So, yeah, remember your own knowledge of your own specialties.
Exactly. So I also have listed here module, and that is a recommendation that some people do, and often it's difficult, maybe the first time you're teaching a course, but a module outcome is something that is completely up to the instructor. So it's really part of the learning plan, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I do want to point out that you might have input into some of these other definitions of desired learning for our UAA students, but you have complete control over your module level outcomes. And those, as you can see by I tried to give you a funnel image, the narrowest broken down small chunks of learning are often helpful for our adult students. So one particular model of course design that, and I have I found my book right here it's kind of, sorry, can't see because of my blur, Understanding by Design. And it's been around for many years, and I come from education, and this is, what we teach, what we taught and are taught. And so it's simplified into these 3 steps. So identify the desired results, and we've just been talking about that. So SLOs and student learning outcomes, as I said. So this is a review. I'm sure all of you know that student learning outcomes have to be measurable. They have to be observable. You have to be able to see them, demonstrate them, being students, something, so that you know that they've met the outcome. But they also have to be very precise and concise. So you're not putting in all the details about the assignment, but it's not the assignment instructions, but instead it is the very basics. So for example, you would never say something like write a paper. Instead, it might say, describe or research or communicate or whatever. And that's another place where faculty have the leeway to decide, number one, do they want to, pick a particular assessment, looking at some of those other needs that the students have to meet, is a research paper the appropriate one, but also perhaps even giving the students a choice, which goes back to our learner step 1, where we don't want to design for the average student. Instead, we want to consider our diverse students, and perhaps giving them a choice of how they meet the outcome would be the most effective. So lots of leeway, I guess, in how you do the next step, but the outcome itself should not have all those details in it, so that you can be do what you want. Not well, let's go on. Okay, so module level outcomes, we talked about this. This is something I just want to ask, do any of you actually have module level learning outcomes? So for, maybe however you define or break up your content into weeks or themes. Kathy, you do? And Margie?
Yes.
Great. And so, as I said, these are totally up to you, but they're also very useful for students. We are always trying to remember that we are working with adults and thinking about how research shows they need to know why they're being asked to do things. So sometimes module level learning outcomes can do that, can explain to students why they're being asked to do what they're doing in that module. And hopefully it'll be describing to them the smaller steps so that they know that these are going to help them get to that larger course learning outcome. And but also for faculty, when you define module level learning outcomes, it can help you teach and make an effective plan. Again, kind of building those steps up to the learning outcomes. So Kathy, do you want to add something there?
No, I don't, but yeah, I don't know how you'd actually, I couldn't put together lectures if I didn't have module level outcomes, because I'd put everything in the world in there.
Yeah. Any other comments about module level learning outcomes?
I just had my course set up as modules originally, and students told me they preferred it in the week mode versus modules. So I had to adjust my outcomes to match that, but it's basically the same.
Yeah, and when I say module, I'm not specifically meaning a certain amount of time. So it could be a week or whatever, but that's a really good point. Yeah, so moving on to the next step of understanding by design. Once we know what we're looking for, we have to determine the acceptable evidence. So I want you to just think about that for a minute. What do we mean by acceptable evidence? And it could be, most of the time we refer to that as assessments. So there's two major types of assessment. And what do you think is the difference between assessment for learning and assessment of learning? Or you don't have to describe the difference, but why are there two different ones, I guess?
Well, I'm going to take a stab at it. One is to help for grading purposes, and one is to assess for effectiveness of what you're doing to achieve the outcomes.
Well, those are definitely two reasons for assessing, yeah. And like you implied, perhaps assessment for learning is so that you can find out how much the students know and how effective your learning plan has been, so that you can then, do what's needed, right, to be able to do more of the, what you might call summative assessment of their learning, like you said, Margie, for grades. Yeah, so that's a great description, Margie. Thank you for that.
So I would have also thought, though, when I see assessment for learning, I would actually kind of think of that as looking at what are the students bringing in to this class or this content, you know, and so how do I need to approach what they're learning? So, you know, do they know if I'm teaching a class on congenital heart defects, do they actually understand what it means when they look at a blood gas? Or, you know, are they bringing that to me? I hope so, but do we know that? So I'm looking at what I need to put in there so that they actually learn what they need.
Absolutely. You're gathering information. Perfect, Kathy. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. You're gathering information, finding out what the students know, what they're bringing. So that could be pre-assessment, like right when they're coming in, you're trying to figure out where they are, how much experience they've had, what they know already. But it also could be in the middle. So we often call that formative assessment because that's exactly the point, Kathy. We're just trying to get that information and then it'll inform what else we need to do. So lots of different ways to think about this, but any other comments on that? Here's another way to describe it: formative assessments versus summative assessments. So research shows that feedback is one of the most important things, and that is students are doing these assessments and they can be, you know, you can call it, I'm calling it a formative assessment, but it can be, you know, a simple activity, a discussion or whatever. But as long as, you know, either you or they are getting some kind of feedback from it, that's what makes it formative. That's what makes it an assessment for learning, so that you can all figure out, oh, I need to go back to this step, or I need to jump ahead, or whatever. We're trying to figure out where people are and taste the soup. That's what they used to say when I taught in the College of Education. Taste the soup and before I serve it to everyone. Any other comments about those types of assessments? So summative, you know, tend to be more higher stakes, maybe cumulative, maybe more likely to be traditional test formats or whatever. Okay, so then the third step, so this is why understanding by design is often called backwards design, is that we don't design the learning plan first, we do that last. As far as, I shouldn't say last, well, let me say it this way. We don't design the learning plan until we know what the outcomes are, the desired results, and what those assessments are. And then we build that bridge between the two for our students. So these are some possible things that could be part of a learning plan, but obviously the learning plan is huge. I think of it in terms of like teacher-centered stuff. So the stuff you're providing to the students, you're presenting the content, you're providing materials and resources, you're using different instructional strategies, like we'll look at that in a minute, and you're providing maybe some using some instructional supports, like maybe scaffolding or something like that, where you're giving them multiple steps to build up to a big research project or whatever it is. And then there's the student-centered part. So there's the stuff the students are doing. So you're requiring them to participate in the learning. So they're given a chance to practice and receive some feedback, and they're engaging in the content. And that is how people learn. They don't learn by you telling them. As much as students think they can learn by, you know, rereading the book or studying your slides, they actually need to do a little bit more engagement and interaction, but it is important to curate a variety of resources. So you guys all do this, I think, pretty well. Just a reminder that we have a wonderful librarian, Jennifer McKay. If you haven't met with her, she is very, very responsive. So send her an email, J.A. McKay. And she does have some very limited office hours here in HSB building, but it's best to just email her, and she works at the medical library. And so she can do all kinds of things to help you and your students. So that I'm going to say, Jennifer, for the first one there. OER, of course, is open educational resources, which more and more are available for free, and perhaps even with the ability to customize them. And I say carefully pick a few technology tools. So this is kind of more my area where I can recommend some tools that you are looking for that might work effectively for your goals for the students, but you want to be a little careful not to use too many tools, and certainly not to use tools that have not been vetted for privacy and accessibility and things that cost students money that could be avoided and things like that. So that's, well, and I'm not the only one here. Of course, there are lots of nursing tools that I'm not an expert about or even in the know. So lots of people you can work with one another to think about other technology tools. But in the end, you want a variety. So I put POV, meaning just from different points of view in different kinds of formats. And I am guessing you guys probably already do a pretty good job of gathering instructional resources. Anybody have any challenges or successes with gathering a variety of instructional resources? So one of the things I'll just say from the instructional design perspective, and going back to our students and our diverse students, is inclusive teaching, which is kind of what I mean by choosing a variety of resources from different points of view and also in different formats. So, a video can provide to students visuals, audio, as well as, if they have accurate closed captions, text. So that kind of covers all the bases. This is a good example of something that could benefit perhaps all of your students in one way or another. Okay, so now the fun part, presenting your content. So you want to come up with ways to really get your students engaged in the content. And you guys, naturally have that because you have a lot very practical side in your clinicals and so on. Then the different instructional techniques, I'm sure you are familiar with many of these. Obviously, presentation, demonstration, discussion. Some of the cooperative learning techniques work really well when you have large classes, and students really often can get more engaged when they're working with their fellow students in team-based learning. The School of Nursing, I know previously, has used some team-based learning techniques with success. And obviously you already use simulation and probably problem-based learning, case studies, and those kinds of things. So imagine you're using all of those. And then as you're doing that, we don't want to forget the formative assessment. So as we're presenting the content, we want to check for understanding at certain points. And then also provide different instructional supports. So instructional supports just allow the students to have more and more independence, where you're providing them maybe a little bit more information, a little bit more guidance at first and help, or, even, fellow student help within groups, but moving them towards doing something more independently, or that's just an example of an instructional support. Any comments on this? Obviously, it's pretty simplified. Roger, did you want to add something? Nope. Okay. This is the fun part. So I'm going to just mention briefly going back to understanding by design and that model, which, as I said, has been around for a long time. It's interesting when you read their book, one of the things that they warn about is they call it the sin of coverage. So what going back to the instructional resources, one of the things that they warn about is covering a textbook as opposed to remembering those student learning outcomes. So there may be some chapters in the textbook that don't directly apply to those student learning outcomes, or there may be some things that are in the student learning outcomes that aren't covered adequately by your textbook. And so just to remember that you're not teaching the textbook, you're teaching to the student learning outcomes, and they're never going to match exactly. So that's what the authors of Understanding by Design call the sin of coverage. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question for you about that, because it's something I've debated with. If you have a textbook and you've assigned readings out of the textbook, do you have any information about whether it's preferable to say, okay, read pages, 1 through 14, and then 20 through 36, starting on 20 at the middle of the, in the third paragraph,
Mhm.
or to assign the whole chapter?
That is an excellent question. Yeah, and my opinion, and I have seen some evidence for it, is yes, tell the students what to focus on. Absolutely.
And that makes me insane when people do that when I take the classes. So that's probably a learning style thing, but.
Well, I don't know if it's a learning style thing, but it could be. I mean, I could see a different gradient on that as far as, telling students to read the chapter, but to focus on, or these are the important parts, because that goes back to the adult learners and the why. And that is, you can say, page 31 is, going to be really important when we get to the X project or whatever. Go ahead, Nina.
Well, I was just gonna say to Kathleen that I did that last semester where I assigned like tables and I assigned certain pages to read, starting at this point and ending at another point. And it seemed to help them focus a little bit more on the content that we were giving them, because it was so broad and there was so much. And plus, with everything else that they have going on in life, they don't tend to be able to focus on a whole chapter. And other things that I got from them was that they were slow readers and they weren't able to comprehend everything that was in the book. So I think just with that, the generations that are coming up, they've got everything else going on, that giving them specifics is easier for them.
Yeah, and I've done both, and I don't have really strong feelings about one way or the other. I just know that, that's something I always found tremendously annoying in class. I said, read this and this and this. And I know other people really like it. So I just wondered if there was any kind of research out there that says do.
I think it was just helpful for them. And it's a lot more work for us because it takes us more time, right?
Definitely.
To look at all that stuff, but
Yeah, it definitely does. But
yeah.
Well,
and sometimes when you're doing that, you reduce kind of supplemental information that's interesting or helpful, which in some cases you have to do, but just, it's just something I've been curious about for many years.
Well, Melissa, I know you want to say something. I just want to jump in and just say, yes, this is the research. Understanding by design and backwards design has been around for a really long time. It's well researched. And basically, I mean, I think the key is, sure, so the understanding by design, people, haven't seen it in a while, but they had this egg, which I loved. It made so much sense to me. It was like, these are the essential things you need to learn. These are the essential understandings. These are good to know, and so that's what you're doing is you're telling them it's not all equally important. These are the really important things. And like Nina said, this table might be really helpful for you because this, for some of you, this will be a different way than reading, 5 paragraphs. So we have to really think of our diverse students. Like you said, we all are different. Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I think I agree with both of them as far as, so each of my presentations has a slide that has must know information to try and help focus that. Getting into specific readings, I ventured to that and I was like, I can't do this because there's just, it's like, stop at page 3, go to page 5, stop at page 7, go to page 9. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I opted to do that must know information, because they also have critical thinking challenges that cover, they get to pick those, but that could be anywhere in the book. And so I felt it was kind of, hard for them to focus if I did that. And the other thing, depending upon your book, I know that somebody mentioned something about slower readers. One thing that I had last semester was somebody, I just can't read it. I can't read it. And so I actually told them all, you can sign in and there's actually on the online option, there's a point for them to actually listen to it. And the one that was having such a problem, she went from barely passing to making A's on the last 2 tests because it was like, I can hear it now. So definitely an option to explore.
And that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. All of those ideas are great. But the last point that you made is that is exactly universal design for learning. And you may have noticed in Blackboard, there's an A button. So when you attach it like a PDF file or something like that, you see a little A button. You probably never clicked on it or realized what that is, but that allows students to convert. And it's not your textbook, but if you attach a PDF file, they can convert it to MP3 and listen to it. And so if you haven't noticed that, try it yourself. It does take a minute or 2 to download, depending on how long it is. But that is a great example, Melissa. Thank you so much, because it is definitely useful. And again, don't say I don't have students with disabilities, but you have students that are in different situations and at certain times, or have a temporary eye problem or whatever it is. As many opportunities you can give them to provide the materials in different ways that they can use at that point in time is going to be better for everybody. So great examples. Thank you so much. So moving on here to the next part of the learning plan. So as I mentioned, people don't learn by you telling them. People don't learn by simply reading. They learn by interacting. So there's a lot of research on the first 3 of these. And I put RSI in parentheses after learner instructor. And so that's what I'm going to talk more about in other sessions, but basically it means regular and substantive interaction. The Department of Education had to define what that means because, of course, of money, of fees and so on. So they defined it basically saying, a correspondence course is going to be different than an online course because of the learner instructor interaction. And that's what RSI defines. Things like office hours, things like regular emails to students, and you guys, there aren't too many asynchronous classes, but it does focus, of course, on classes that have no synchronous meetings. But anyway, so there's lots of different types of participation or interaction in a course, no matter what the delivery method. And so obviously learner content is in every course, even a correspondence course. And then, you know, after correspondence, we have all these other, and perhaps even a correspondence course could have some of those other ones, but it would take a little bit of designing to do that. But anyway, so I just think that these are useful, so I wanted to share them with you. And those bottom two, as I said, they're not in all the research, but definitely they come up as your students are doing those, community for sure, right? Perhaps even institution. Any comments on these levels of learner participation, or I should say examples of different kinds of learner participation?
I encourage my students to do their quizzes collaboratively, because I tell them that's a practice for the exams. And not only does it help them understand the material better, because they discuss the question rather than just answer it, they discuss it and get more detail from other people's thoughts on how to approach that question. But it also helps them with approaching questions in other courses and on the NCLEX and the standardized tests at the end, because some students struggle with how questions are worded, but when they see how other students approach the question and they realize that they read it differently than what the question was asking, that's practice for them for test taking, as well as practice for them for the actual content. So I really encourage collaborative learning on quizzes and open book too.
Great idea. Thanks, Margie. Any other examples?
One thing I've been trying recently, the last couple of semesters, that has worked in a couple classes and been kind of a failure in a couple others, is in Blackboard now. In the Blackboard site for each class, I have a space that students can post in, even anonymously if they want to, where I basically say, it's called What I Learned This Week, and ask students to post what they've, you know, I think there's 3 questions. What's the most important thing I learned this week? How will it affect my nursing practice in the future? And what areas are still unclear to me? And then I encourage the students to go in there, and I go in there and I try to clarify things, and I kind of encourage them to use that going back and forth to Tad and say, oh, hey, yeah, that confused me at first too. And I've had a couple classes, I thought that was just a spectacular tool, and a couple others in which, you know, it was dead silence the whole semester. So, you know, there's some secret that makes it work really well, and I haven't figured out what the secret is that's making it work in some places and not others. But
That's a great idea. So you're basically using some of those exit ticket ideas that, you know, people often do as kind of a formative assessment, but more of a metacognitive formative assessment, I guess. And you're sharing that with the whole class, or asking them to share it with the whole class. So perhaps there's a little hesitation until someone gets the ball rolling. So maybe that's something you can try, is ask a student to be the first person to post something on there, and if you can.
yeah, that might be worth a try, because I've done that in face-to-face classes, as you said, it's kind of an exit ticket. And the classes I've done it online with, it actually, when it works even better, because you do get that additional student involvement. But you know, when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. So, but that might be a good idea, assigning somebody to each week to start things going.
I think that would be good. Any other comments? So as I have mentioned before, this is another huge area of that you can explore and have fun and come up with some ideas and try them, and they may be successful and they may not, but that's all part of the fun of teaching, is to try things that and again, I'm here to give you some ideas. I've got all kinds of resources with lists of possible ideas that might work for your courses. So we can work together on those. So this is the problem with the annotations in Zoom. It doesn't clear automatically. I'm so used to whenever I taught online with Blackboard Collaborate, those annotations would go away when you switch to a new slide, but they don't in Zoom. Anyway, so this is what alignment, this is a graphic and a definition from Quality Matters. So Quality Matters is an organization that UAA subscribes to for, it has 3 tiers, and but one of them is course reviews. And so when courses go through a Quality Matters review, the most important element that is reviewed is the alignment. And the alignment means everything in the course is aligned to the student learning outcomes. So it makes sure there's no fluff or things in there that really are just for, you know, maybe the instructor thought it'd be cool to use some tool or something like that. And it doesn't happen quite so much in higher education as it does, of course, in K-12, where fun things kind of take over, like themed or activity things that don't necessarily apply to learning outcomes. But you'd be surprised. I'm actually a reviewer for Quality Matters, and you know, most courses do need a little help to better align with their student learning outcomes. So, you know, the assessments maybe aren't actually measuring those student learning outcomes, or all of the student learning outcomes, for example. This is a graphic that I just made up here because it makes sense to me that the outcomes form the base of everything in your course. So I put outcomes at the bottom, and then assessments at the top, because that's where we want students to be able to meet those assessments. If they do, then they have succeeded. But then in the middle, that's what we've been just talking about, all those materials, all those activities, and the tools that are part of student learning. So does this, I guess what should I say, would you guess, just with this little bit of information about alignment, would you guess that your course is aligned to those student learning outcomes? Or would you guess that there might need to be some changes made to better streamline things? What do you think? Well,
Being brand new.
oh yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Roger.
I think that there's, see that regular opportunity for improvement, just in anything that we do. So I like this visual, that helps. Thinking about alignment and how we get to where we're going, and so.
Great, and I'm glad you said that, Roger, too. Actually, one of the major tenets of Quality Matters is continuous improvement. That's what it's about. So the course reviews are not just like, yeah, it passed or didn't pass. It's, you basically get some steps to do to meet the standards in a review, which is, it's pretty interesting process to go through. And there's all kinds of levels. You can just do a self-review, for example. And I do some workshops on that are Quality Matters specific too. So if you're interested, you can review your own course for alignment in one of those workshops. So I'm going to skip that one for now, but this is another way to look at one alignment of one of your outcomes. So maybe an activity might be useful for you to think about one of your courses, pick one outcome from that course. And that's what I intended to do here in the middle here as an example: define and describe the psychodynamics of major mental illnesses. I just picked one from a course in the School of Nursing. And then think about all the different things that align to that. And so I just did, this is like a step one of alignment, kind of thinking, okay, if I did this with each of them, would I find that there's, no bubbles outside any of my outcomes, or just one bubble, or just two bubbles? Or, are they all assessments and not enough practice, or all practice and not enough assessment, or whatever? So this might be, again, everybody has different ways of looking at things, but this might be an activity that could help you see if you do have alignment. Another way to do it, and I have permission from Cheryl Toscano, she's done a lot of, in fact, she has multiple Quality Matters courses, Quality Matters reviewed courses. And she, alignment map is recommended by Quality Matters, but not required. And alignment map it doesn't have to be in a certain way, but basically it does need to include module level outcomes, which she has here in the first column, and then assessments. So again, we're following along in the steps of course design by putting our outcomes first, then our assessments, and then our learning plan, what we're actually going to do to learn the material in that third column. So you can see alignment maps look all different ways, but I just wanted to use one from nursing, and I knew Cheryl has done some. This is from a while ago. She may have changed it since then, but when you do go through a Quality Matters review, you have a instructional designer as your partner. So I worked with Cheryl through that review. I wasn't a reviewer, I was her helper in getting the course content updated to meet the requirements to get the course through.
Yeah. Hi, Katie, is this something that Cheryl put in the syllabus, or this was something that she just did at the end of her class for evaluation, like for credentialing type of thing?
That is a great question, Rita. Thank you so much for pointing that out, because I didn't say that. It actually could be used at any point. It really could be a plan. It is intended to be a planning tool to begin. It's like, so as you're designing your course, perhaps an alignment map would help you plan. But it's also, most people, like when we did all of that pivot training when COVID happened, this was one of the things we did with faculty. And so it doesn't always happen at the beginning, but it's just one tool that can be used really at any point in your design of the course or delivery of the course, just to find holes. So to look kind of for things that there's really not enough practice for this one, or there's really no assessment that assesses this particular outcome. So if you put it in some kind of a table or a concept map or whatever makes sense to you, then that's where you can kind of identify where those areas are that need attention. Thank you for asking that, Rita. So as far as Cheryl, I don't know specifically. I think probably the first course she did, she may have not already had an alignment map, but now that she's comfortable with that process, I think as she teaches new courses, she does this, at the beginning as part of the design.
Katie, can I show you or share your screen for a minute and show you what we used to put in all of our AAS syllabi? I don't think they're in all of them anymore. I mentioned Margie has it in hers as an alignment.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Kathy, let me just say that was my last slide, except for any kind of reflection and questions and stuff like that. So I know that it is 2:00. I'm available to stay, and if you are too, that'd be great. Thanks. And Kathy, go ahead.
Okay. So you can see this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so historically, we had this in all of our syllabi in the associate degree program that actually linked everything as far as NLN competencies, the Society of Pediatric Nursing, AAS, School of Nursing, and then course outcomes, and then the projects and learning assessment or evaluation kind of activities over here. So that could also, Cheryl's is much neater because it's very, very simplified, but this was essentially designed to meet the accreditation needs.
Right. And so Kathy, what yours is just an expanded version. So Cheryl's
Right.
is simply course level alignment. So it's really just those last two columns of this one. And
Right.
yours is much broader. So that's why I started off by showing that, that slide, because you're right. This is, so there's definitely program mapping, curriculum mapping, all kinds of different levels of this mapping. And, I'm working with the graduate program, Jessie and her group, and they are working on the new doctorate program using program mapping, like similar to this. So yeah, thanks for sharing this example, Kathy.
And just as an FYI, as we come up, the reason we ended up putting this in our syllabi and as we come up on accreditation, as we did in the past, have at least one group of accreditors who were very disturbed that our students could not relate our course outcomes to university or School of Nursing outcomes. So we put this in there so they at least had that knowledge available if they wanted it. And I don't know if that'll ever happen again, but at least that way it was there for everybody to see if they are interested.
You bring up a really good point, because even the course level alignment maps that I started talking about are not always shared with students. In some cases, and it depends on your students, right? Because I was helping some people through the Quality Matters process that were, lower level students, and they were totally just confused by the alignment map for the course, and they did not want to see that. So, we gave them that information in a different way. Any other comments or questions about alignment mapping? Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much for participating and sharing what you guys do. And I'm sure we could have had a 2-hour session and had a little bit more time for sharing, but I know you've got a lot of other things to do. So any feedback or ideas for future sessions that you might want to dig deeper into? I have some ideas already, but I would love to have feedback from you guys. And thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm so happy we had such a good turnout. All right, well,
Thank you,
I'm
Katie.
going to
This has
stop the
been awesome.
recording.
Oh, thank you. It's been awesome. And, just for
Alrighty.
ideas, for new faculty like myself, hearing those ideas that others have found successful, like what did I learn in the Blackboard, tools used during class, like, I'm thinking, actually looking for a tool for, developing a word cloud, during the class, things like that. And I'm sure there are things out there that sound great, but disastrous. And others that sound great that, are not as well known. So thank you for sharing. It's appreciated.